Hello, and welcome to Meet the Author, a show where we explore the world through the imagination of talented writers. On this show, we will talk with authors from Laurel, Prince George's County, the DMV, and beyond. Hello, and welcome to Meet the Author. When you think Little Red Riding Hood, you normally think of a fairy tale of a young girl going to grandma's house and having a run-in with a big bad wolf. But what if the story was expounded upon and you learned that Red was a descendant of fighters with a family still at war, and the love of her life turns out to be part wolf? Well, that's where H.L. Brooks's Red August series takes us. To learn more about the author and her series, let's meet Miss Brooks. Hi, Miss Brooks. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So with that intro, we're going to talk about your book a little bit later in the segment, but we're going to start just with some background information about you, okay? Okay. So you grew up in a military family and you traveled a lot, and you decided to, or you eventually settled in Maryland. So what made you decide to move to Maryland? Or talk to us about your travels as a military family, and then what had you settle in Maryland?
Well, I grew up, my dad was a Marine, and we lived all across the country, California, Texas, Virginia. We ended up in Virginia Beach, where I met my ex-husband, my now ex-husband, and he eventually got a job in Maryland. And that's how I ended up in Maryland. And I love Maryland. I haven't left it since.
Okay. Compared to California, huh? We still get...
Well, I was little when I lived in California. I do remember liking it.
Okay. Well, that's good. We're definitely glad to have you here. And by reading your bio, I found you're very creative. You've done things like painting, sculpting, interactive installations, photography. You do blogging and online journalism. You want to share some of that creativity with us, how you got started, what type of things you do?
I've always been creative. So I would say I started in grade school. And eventually, when I realized I could do art for a living, I started practicing art. And the internet really helped with that. When it became more prevalent in the late 90s, I had what was called a homepage. Okay. But it was before blogs. Blogs are what, made it easier to start to have a way to get my artwork out there, because I didn't really have, I was a stay-at-home mom at the time. I didn't really have a way to get my artwork out. So I started drawing. Okay. And then I eventually moved. That was when I was still living in Virginia. We eventually moved to Maryland. I got involved with theater community. The theater community in Southern Maryland is actually quite rich. Okay. And I met a lot of friends there and took up photography, very supportive artistic community there. And went from photography, doing things like headshots, boudoir photography, projects. I have a project called Body Politics that was at DC's Artomatic, which is a huge art event they do every once in a while when they can find a building for it. But I had my Body Politics project there, which was mostly photography, interactive, body positive, made you think about the way we think about ourselves and our bodies. We're sort of out there in the world getting the message every day that we're not good enough the way we are. So I wanted to do something with that, because I had struggled with my self-esteem for years, and that project was very fulfilling. So all through that time, I'm like, my husband is working full-time, I'm doing art part-time, being a mom full-time. And that was really how all of that culminated. Eventually I had like an online arts magazine that I started with volunteers that would review theater, local music, stuff like that. It got a little overwhelming because a lot of requests came in. And that I stopped doing that. And eventually I just moved to Greenbelt, which I moved to a little tiny apartment when my husband and I split. I moved to a little apartment, and I had all this studio stuff, all this, this painting and photography equipment that I just didn't have the space in my life for. And I was thinking about what could I do that would be something I could have in a small space. And I knew that writing was something I could do in a small space. And I'd been blogging for years, back when it was home pages in the 90s, and then eventually blogging. So I was doing that since 2002, blogging. And that was a way that I could still continue to be creative. Occasionally I would do photo projects on site, and on location rather than in in my space since I didn't really have enough space for it.
You've been pretty busy. That's a lot of ground to cover because people normally just focus on one thing, but you've covered a lot of different areas, which is amazing. And then since being here in Maryland, you've taken on you've been very active in the community. So have you done some of those projects here in Maryland?
Yes, I'm still working on one of the projects that I started a while ago called The Goddess Next Door, which is a sort of like a photo journal about the sensuality of every woman. Okay. And that is a project that's been 10 years in the working, so I'm not going to stop doing that. In fact, I have a shoot scheduled for that a few weeks from now. Okay. So I'm still continuing to do that with various models who want to be involved with that. And for Maryland, other than that, books and writing is my focus, literary is my focus, and bringing women together is kind of my focus.
Okay. And that's how we met at one of the economic and community development meetings where you were promoting yourself as an author and attending some of those events. Mm-hmm. You remember what was your most memorable ECD event?
It was the women's breakfast where we met. It was, what was it, the Women's Small Business Appreciation Breakfast, I think it was called. And I really enjoyed that. It was my first event since I moved. I only moved to Laurel in July, so I haven't even been here that long. Right. And I lived in Greenbelt for like 7 years before that, and then I was in Southern Maryland, so back. But I've only been in Laurel, and I find that Laurel to be incredibly receptive to its small business community. I've been to 2 small business events, including that one already, plus a small business market that I can't remember if it was November or December, but a small business Saturday market that Laurel also arranged. And I found everybody in the community to be so receptive and helpful, including you, for example. And that was at that women's breakfast was where I met you. Right. And then this happened.
Yeah, it was very nice, different activities and a way for you to learn the community and find out what we have to offer and to share some of your talents with us. So we definitely appreciate that too.
Oh, yeah. That's where the Arts Council came. I was also appointed to the Arts Council. Right. So I applied to that and was accepted. So
very busy. We definitely appreciate that. So hopefully we can see your work around town too.
Maybe.
Okay. And speaking of other things that you've done in Laurel, so you hosted salons. Now tell us about those. What does that entail?
I started a group called Women Authors of Maryland, and you don't have to be a Maryland writer, you don't have to be a published author. It was just an informal group I started on Facebook to connect with women writers because I feel like women writers have unique sets of problems compared to male writers. Right. And I wanted to have a community of women writers that we could talk to from every level of whether they're just thinking about writing something or whether they want to start a literary or author assistance agency. Maybe they have skills in editing or whatever. But and then you have the more advanced people who published a lot of books, and they might be traditionally published and self-published. But I just wanted going out in the world with my work. First, getting it published was a whole thing, and then it's a lot of work that goes into one novel. Right. So I felt like I had some knowledge that I could impart. Okay. And I also felt like there were people that could probably help me a little bit. And then there were people who, I've always been like, somebody called me a natural born cheerleader. Like I want to, if there are women out there who are just kind of stuck, or if they have an idea and they're not sure it's a good idea, to get a small group of women together who have that varying range of experience is so helpful. Mm-hmm. It encourages the people who, and I'm proud to say that my salon group has a number of introverts. Okay. Writers can tend to be very introverted lot, except for maybe the coach ones. But other than that, I think that in general we like to sit in our rooms and write our stories. Okay. And I think that that was just a desire to connect with women writers about the kinds of particular problems that women writers face. So. That was how that started.
Good. That sounds beneficial. Like you said, if you're introverted, it's good to get out there and not just always writing, but talk and meet people and then learn from one another.
In a safe space. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's very good. Okay. And those still continue on, right? You have those frequently?
I have those once a month. Last year I skipped August and September because we had the Right Women Book Fest last year was the first inaugural year for that, and it was just too much on my plate. I try to not do too much, but I get excited about things, and so then I dive in.
I understand totally. That women stuff, I understand.
Yeah, we just think we can do everything.
Right. Okay. So we'll look forward to hearing more of those. And then you mentioned the Right Woman Book Fest, which we definitely want to focus on. So you're the founder of the Right Woman, and that's WRITE Book Fest. So tell us all about that. You mentioned it was your inaugural year last year, but tell us about that, how it got started, and more information about that.
So the Right Women Book Fest began in the salons. Having these meetings with these women was so energizing. I started to look for a group of women that were having a book fest of some kind. And there are groups of women writers, but I haven't seen a women-specific book festival, at least not on the East Coast that I could find. And I decided to just do one. And I had my wedding out at Marietta House Museum, and I had some events that I attended there as a vendor of my writing, and I just thought it would be a really nice venue, and so I looked into it, and the woman there, Stacy Hawkins, who's an amazing person and very helpful with the Prince George's County Park Department, helped us facilitate having a book festival. I told her what my ideas were. I had one of the other women in the salon, Cardin Brooks, no relation, but Cardin Brooks, she's an author, a published author, and she is my main helper. She's outreach, she does, so the two of us essentially, with help from some family members and a few salon members, put on that whole festival last year, and it was lovely. We had, it's meant to be an inclusive, diverse group of focusing on women authors, but also we have had artists there and literary aid. You know, we want anything to do with literary, if it's women focused, women run, we would like it to be a part of this event. And so we had like a kids tent, and in the kids tent we had Firefighter Jones, a woman firefighter, read stories about heroic women, and then we had Drag Queen Story Time, where Demanda Martini of Southern Maryland came up and read about LGBTQ plus some books that were related to that to the kids, and we had poets reading their poetry. We had like a quartet band that Marietta House helped facilitate. And then a whole huge tent full of wonderful authors. It was very exciting, plus some artists who did things like journals, handmade journals and book plates and anything related to books or writing.
That sounds great.
So we enjoyed that, and I hope to expand on that too.
Okay, so information about this upcoming event?
This year's event is going to be Saturday, September 26th from noon to 6 p.m. at Marietta House Museum in Prince George's County. It's in Glendale. And we're looking for vendors. The registration, maybe by the time this is on, will probably be up. I'm hoping the first week of March the registration information will be out there. I was working really hard at getting it electronic this year because we had papers and some of them were going to Marietta, and it was a little confusing. I think trying to use those long-term skills of web design and blogging from the beginning of time to go ahead and use those skills to automate what I can and make it a little easier for the attendees as well. And I'm trying to make it very affordable. Last year the tables were only $10. So it's not going to be $10 this year. But there will be a discount for the first year vendors, and we just try to make it very affordable for the authors, especially the new ones are having, it's harder to get out there.
So that sounds great. We'll definitely post the information and look forward to people coming out and visiting, and hope it's a great event.
Thank
you.
We'll
definitely post that. So that's about what you've been, you grew up in different areas and what you've been doing creatively. So now we want to talk specifically, though, about your books.
Okay.
So I did get a chance to read Red August, the first in a series. So you also have Red Archer, and your third one will be coming out in the fall.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll talk about Red August. Just tell us a basic premise about the series.
Okay.
Tell us overall.
Okay, so Red August is the name of the series. This Red August, Red Archer, and Red Hunter will be the third book. And it is the tale of a young girl, well, a young woman who discovers that she is part werewolf. And she's also part of this hunter clan, and it's sort of Scottish based. My husband has some Scottish heritage, and I've always found Celtic lore interesting. Okay. So I sort of weaved that into it, but it's set in a small town, because I love small towns, in Maryland, because I love Maryland. And it really is a tale of romance with adventure in it, and it's essentially a retelling of Red Riding Hood. But so some of the key elements are in there, like the dangerous wolf, and sometimes the wolf isn't always who you think it is. And I think that the thing I like to do with my story, and what this story, at least this story is about, probably it'll be a thread throughout anything I write, but is about love, and about all the kinds of love there are, and who we're supposed to love, and who's good for us and who isn't good for us. So really, that is an undercurrent to the entire story.
Okay, and I can see that now that you mentioned it, and I'm thinking back, I was like, okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. So I'll have another set of eyes when I read the Red Archer, because I'm definitely going to read that one. Like I mentioned, like in some of my notes. So I read the first one, and this is kind of my first time with fictional books in this type of way, and I was pleasantly surprised.
I'm
It's
so glad.
very well written. It definitely caught my attention the first couple pages, so I will say that this book is for mature audiences.
Yes, it's got naughty bits, as I like to say. And you know, what happened was I had set out to. I had wanted to take my writing and do something that just made some money, you know, that like 10,000 words and make some money. And at the time I started working on this, erotica was really big, like short story erotica. Now, erotica is a very specific genre. It's all about, you know. So what happened was I started writing the story, and I became so interested in the characters. I was like, well, why? Why is he interested in her, and why is she interested in him, and why shouldn't they love each other? And that came in layers of, and then I wanted there to be older women characters, and I wanted there to be a wise woman, and you know, I just wanted to make the cast a little more interesting and diverse, and so it ended up being more like, you know, 120,000 words or whatever. So that's how this came into being. I've always liked fairy tales since I was little. I have a collection of fairy tales, and since I was young. So this was a way for me to sort of make my own fairy tales, or take parts of my favorite fairy tales and turn them into something. So the Red Riding Hood's just my first. I plan on taking other fairy tales and doing something with them. And the focus will always be a female protagonist. So. And
it's cool because it kind of lets us grow up. Like Red Riding Hood, you think little kids, but you can grow up with this, and you can, as an adult, read and enjoy a little Red Riding Hood. So I thought that was really awesome.
Thank you.
It was a great read. I like to pull out interesting things that I noticed in the book. Like you mentioned the love, so I got to look back at that. But I noticed the history and food and drink and holidays, and you mentioned the Scottish culture. So your husband, you said, is Scottish, but are you Scottish, or where did you get that information from? Did you have to research that? How did that come about?
I did have to research it. My husband knows some of it, and his parents have Scottish. They're both primarily Scottish, so they do Scottish festivals and stuff like that. So once I started to write this book, and I knew I wanted the main love interest to be Scottish, we just really dove hard into the whole Scottish thing. So I did a lot of research. I asked his parents a lot of questions, and it's so much easier now to see like what kind of apple grew in Scotland, you know, in the 1800s. You know, it's so much easier to find something like that. Like I never would have known that there were pearls from the Perth that you can't get anymore. You know,
Right.
those are the kinds of things that you can find online now that would have taken you to the library and you might never have seen. So it did require a lot of research. Research slows a project down, so it took like about 2 years, you know, to do this. This one's quicker, and then the actual writing time on the third one will be even quicker. So I'm getting quicker as I go, but research is a huge part of it if you want it to feel authentic, and I like that authentic feel. I've done in theater, when I was involved with theater, I like to do props and set decoration and stuff like that, and the authenticity is really important to me. So yeah, the Scottish stuff it can be complicated because, you know, tartans is a whole thing, you know, and it can be complicated, but it was a lot of fun research.
Yeah, I'm saying, like I said, I'm not familiar with it, and I guess I could do my research too, but just reading it, you know, it flowed, it made sense, it didn't seem phony, you know what I mean?
Great.
Yeah, it was very unrealistic, so.
I didn't want to like overdo it, but I wanted to show my love for it, you know, by peppering it in there.
Yeah,
so.
it was very good.
Thank you.
So one thing that caught my husband's attention when he saw the books and I was asking, you know, around for questions and things like that, he mentioned the cover art. So who is the model, or is there a model? Is it based on somebody, or?
So I made the covers. Photography was something that I was doing, and this is my friend Natalie.
Okay.
Her name is Natalie Parks now. At the time, she was Natalie Gibbs.
Cool.
And it might interest you to know, Natalie's actually a blonde. And in this cover, she's about 7 months, I guess, pregnant with her son Archer.
That's cool.
And she's had another since then. So she just photographs. The camera loves Natalie.
Okay.
So she just volunteered to do it. I love the look. I still have a lot of photos I can use for the third book, or if she wants to come out and do another, we can do that. But yes.
That's cool. My husband just threw that out there, and I didn't think that it was based on anybody, because I thought I was going to ask you and you were going to say, you know, I made it up or something like that. But that's very cool that that's actually somebody.
A lot of cover art comes from stock photography. For me, because I publish, if you go through traditional publishing and stuff, you can, a lot of times they do the cover, or they hire the cover. A lot of people who do their own covers use cover services. I don't like to have to mess with the copyright stuff. I like to own everything I do. And since, you know, I took these and Natalie agreed to it, I own them. And so I can distribute them in any way I like. So that's one aspect of it. But not to say that the other ways are bad or wrong, just that that's the way I like to do it. And since I've been doing photography for so long, it just made sense.
That is great. That is awesome. Now, another thing we did a little bit different for this episode, you have a very strong social media presence. So I reached out to you and asked you if you would ask your viewers or your followers some questions that they would want me to ask you on the show.
Okay.
So a couple of questions that we were given was, what made you decide to write in your genre?
I just always loved fairy tales. Since I was a kid, I love fairy tales. Every time I thought about writing a story, all I could think of was fairy tale type stories. You know, it's funny. If there's a movie that's a fairy tale, even if it's bad, I watch it. If it's, I have a whole collection of fairy tale books. And when, I have to say that in some way, I think the Harry Potter universe, seeing how big that became and being able to just sort of immerse myself in it. I remember being in one of the movies when it had just first come out, maybe the third, and I was just sitting there, how engaged everybody was and how excited everybody was. I was like, I want to tell a story that I know I could never get this big of a crowd, but it would be nice if just a few people could immerse themselves in my stories and just feel connected to the characters. So that was what I wanted, and I wanted it to be, it's a way that you can talk about politics and sex and, you know, love and all these things in a different way. Right. So you can talk about, you know, a lot of the social issues we have without directly talking about them in a way that makes people reactive to it, because it's hunters and werewolves and, you know, things like that. So
well, you'll have a little community, because I've been sharing. Once I started the book, I said, you have to read this, you have to read this. So we'll get a good little community going on sure. So another question was, who is your favorite character that you've written and why?
So it's like choosing a favorite child, because I like them all for different reasons, or hate them for, you know, I created them to hate. Maybe hate's is too strong a word, but to just maybe despise, you know. I have to say that August, I think, because there's so much of me learning who I was in her. I can understand some people actually don't really care for her much. They think she's immature and they can't understand why Phelan's all into her or whatever. And I'm hoping over the course, I'm planning on 5 to 6 books in the series. So I'm hoping her character arc will satisfy some of those people if they stick along. I mean, you know, but for my own I write to satisfy myself first, and I want to tell the story of somebody who was young and didn't understand why she had all these strong feelings and how the world works and secrets about who she was, and then grow from that. And in my life, I've learned a lot about boundaries and love, and I feel like it's fairy tales are an easy way to share that. So,
and that's fair.
So I would say August is my favorite in terms of that. As far as love interest, Phelan, of course. I wrote him a lot of his sweet little romantic things he does are directly from my husband.
Oh, that's cool. Does he know that? Does your husband
know
that?
He knows. He's my editor.
Cool.
He's a wonderful editor, and it's really good because he can organize the information the way I want it to actually. We've been writing together a long time. Back when I had that online magazine, he used to edit my reviews and stuff. So we've been writing. He's a writer too. So we've been writing together for a very long time, and he knows what I'm trying to say. If I'm not getting it out right, he can smooth it over. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So Phelan is who I'm in love with, but August is the one I feel most connected to. But I also love the older female characters who have something to teach us.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. It's like, because you have to pick the main character, but there are a couple other characters in there that stand on their own. Yeah. And you can appreciate them for who they are.
And I'm hoping to have shoot-off stories about Abel and Bridget and these other Sorcha and these other characters because I want to know what the rest of their life is like, what they're doing. So
very cool. We look forward to it. I'm in here with you now. I'm waiting. Okay, I think we have. So one more question from your Facebook fans. Okay. How do your real life personal relationships drive the personal relationships with and between your characters? I guess how does that influence?
I think that the influence just comes from learning over my life. I'm going to be 50 this year, next month actually, and I think that I used to be a person who had really bad boundaries, and I learned to have good boundaries. And through that process, I feel like I've had a lot of heartache and a lot of lessons that I wanted to impart. And clarify the question again, because now I'm getting a little.
Oh, no problem.
It was like
just like how does your personal life and relationships?
Okay, I was answering the question. So my personal heartaches, and also just my outrage about people trying to tell people who they should love. That is a huge part of it too. I mean, there's a lot of politics in this book. You can read these books as straight fairy tales. I mean, they've got all the elements of a fairy tale. They've got magic. They've got battles. But if you're looking for them, there are a lot of layers in there about politics and social things and love. So anything that I've been through and that I want to be different, or I wish was different, or feel could be better, I try to have a lesson in there, which that's what fairy tales are. They're lessons.
And that's a good outlet for you. And like you said, when we read it, we'll get it. If you get it, good. So definitely I'll get put on another set of eyes when I'm reading it again, and I'll definitely let you know.
Okay, good.
Okay, so those were all the questions from your followers. So we'll let them know that they've been out there. Hopefully they'll check out this episode. So the last thing we want to do, just to relax and end the segment, is play a little word game with you. Okay. Just like I mentioned, I pick out some words from your story. You just tell me kind of what they mean to you. Okay. Now, you don't have to do a whole lot, brief back at me, or you can expound how you feel. Okay. So the first word, of course, is red.
Red is a powerful color. It is the color of passion and rage. So I think those are pretty good descriptors.
Okay, sounds good. How about wolf?
Unbridled passion, the bad parts of ourselves, or that seem bad, but actually might not be so bad after all.
About hunter?
the person who seems like the savior, or the person who's going to save the day, but again, maybe they're not saving the day.
Okay.
Maybe they are.
Okay. You got to pay attention, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, how about healer?
That makes me think of course, Bridget and wise women. Women sort of carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. I think of women as healers. I think I look to women to heal. So.
Okay. And this one stood out to me, and I hope I pronounced it right. Lichen?
That is a wolf.
Okay.
So lichens are another word for a wolf,
Okay.
and they tend to be shifting. Shifters go from human to wolf form. Yeah,
Okay.
I have different ideas in my head too, because different stories from different parts of the world have the wolves differently. Like
Okay.
one it might be a standing wolf, and it might, somewhat still have its human form, or it might just completely become what looks like a wolf as we would know it.
Oh,
but yeah,
okay. So you're learning
lichen.
something.
Yeah.
Okay, just a couple more about family.
Family. Family is who you're blood related to isn't necessarily your family. Blood relation is strong, but chosen family can be stronger.
Okay, I like that. About love.
All kinds of love. Love for friends, love for romantic partners, love for the earth, love for fellow man. I think that is a big theme of mine. Love is really important to me.
Yes. Okay, and last but not least, but a little different, anger.
We're back to red again.
Okay, fair enough.
But red, I think adolescence comes to mind, and jealousy.
Okay.
Anger and jealousy to me are very connected.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we came full circle. So
Yes.
that worked out very nice. Okay, so you made it. Thank you
Yay.
for playing along. It wasn't too bad, was
Nah.
it? All right, so we just want to share, your upcoming books and your projects, how we can reach you and your contact information, if you'd just like to share that.
Okay, you can find pretty much everything on hlbrooks.com. And I'm going to add some links to the Right Women Book Fest on there, but to find the Right Women Book Fest, it's the Right Women, WRITE, bookfest.org.
Okay.
And like I said, if you could find all of my social media, email, contact, all that stuff at hlbrooks.com.
Okay, well, thank you. It was great having you here. Glad you
Thank
got
you
a
for
chance
having me.
share your books and
Yeah.
your events. I look forward to working with you, because you're not going to lose me now.
Yeah, I hope to see you at the book festival. It's so good to
Yeah.
meet.
Nice. So glad you came.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back.
Okay.
Red August immediately grabs your attention from the very first page. Then it keeps you engaged as the story unfolds surrounding August Archer, the loss of her beloved father, an abrupt move to Maryland, and the secrets of a family full of mystery and wonder that August knew nothing about. This was a well-written fictional suspense, and I can't wait to continue reading the series. Here are a few tips on developing fictional characters. First, establish a character's motivations and goals. This creates interesting characters and creates a story arc. Do a slow reveal. Reveal information bit by bit as you tell the story to make it more realistic, like how you would get to know a person in real life. Create conflict. Conflict creates tension and is used to move a story forward by forcing characters to make decisions. Give important characters a backstory. Dig into your characters' lives and flesh out their histories. Even if most of it won't make it onto the page, the backstory will help you figure out what makes them tick and will inform their decisions in the story. And paint a physical picture of your characters. Describe their hair color, eyes, stature, mannerisms, all things to help readers envision a more realistic image of your character. Develop secondary characters. Create different types of characters that contrast with one another. It can illuminate the main character's traits, strengths, and flaws. These are just a few helpful hints. For more information about writing, publishing, and all things media, visit www.jmediagroup.net. I I would like to thank Ms. Brooks for joining me today and sharing her fictional series and all the events and resources available to women authors. If you are an author and would like to be featured on our program, you can send an email to cmjohnson@laurel.md.us or call 301-725-5300, extension 2110. We would love to have you on the show. I'm Christine Johnson, reminding you to open a book and let it take you on your next adventure.